I'm Patrick Byers, Horticulture Field Specialist with University of Missouri Extension. Thank you for joining us for our video series, Practical Advice from Successful Farmers. Today the subject is business models, and we'll be learning from Curtis Millsap of Millsap Farms near Springfield, Missouri.
Welcome to Millsap Farm. I'm Curtis Millsap, and my wife Sarah and I have been farming here at Millsap Farm for 17 years. We actually started the farm a little bit before that, but we moved to this property 17 years ago, and that's when we started our farming career in earnest. Neither one of us grew up on farms. We say farming skipped a generation in our family. Our grandparents both had property and were farmers or farmer adjacent, her in Colorado, me here in Missouri. And so when we grew up, we were in town, or in her case, sort of the suburbs of Denver. I was here in Springfield, Missouri, where our farm is now. And we both grew up with big gardens and with families who cared deeply about good food and nutrition and active outside lives, but we didn't actually grow up on farms. So when we started considering what we were going to do, farming as a married couple, when we started considering that, farming sort of rose to the top based on several criteria, but the biggest one being that it's a great way to intersect our loves of being outside and community. And so that's really what our farm is about community and this getting to do this amazing work we get to do outside. I would not be at all interested in an indoor farming career, so that's part of what we love about it. When we started 17 years ago, we started with a very small CSA. I think our first CSA meeting had about 5 people show up, and 3 of them signed up for a CSA share, which still amazes me that 3 people thought that we were a good bet. And so that season we had about 25 CSA members, and we went to the farmers market here in Springfield. It was the Greater Springfield Farmers Market was the one we were attending at the time. It was an interesting learning experience going to farmers market for the first time. One bit of wisdom that we had gleaned was that our farmers market had an exclusion list, crops you could not grow your first year. So we actually signed up to be members the year before, and then we showed up to sell stuff the second year, and that was a nice little sidestep of a rule that would have been a problem for us. But that first year when we showed up, the first season to sell when we showed up, I remember showing up with trays of beautiful basil plants and all sorts of flowers and you know, we were basically selling seedlings at that point early in the season. And this was probably the first week of April. And it was snowing sideways on a mall parking lot. And so welcome to the farming life. You know, that was quite a way to introduce yourself to the farming world, trying to keep your basil from dying. So you know, we started with that first season. We had some farmers market success. Our CSA worked out pretty well. By the fall, we were looking at the winter and going, okay, so we managed to make it through the summer, mostly on farm income. I did a couple of side jobs. I was doing construction at the time, and so I had done a few little side jobs to kind of keep the bills paid. But for the most part, we'd earned some income from farming, and it was working. But we could see that the winter, you know, the money we had made wasn't going to carry us through the winter, so we were going to need to generate income in the winter. And of course, then we had a decision to make. Are we going to go farm year-round? And so then we're going to try and sell stuff through the winter, or are we going to kind of take winters off and I might need to earn other income in the winter? And so in our case, we decided to do the year-round farming. And that was influenced largely by Elliott Coleman and his book, The Winter Harvest Manual, and also by the fact that people eat, it turns out, very regularly, 360 some days a year, most of us, and several times a day if we can get it. And so we thought, well, the people are wanting to buy the food. There are people, farmers around the country producing food through the winter now. We should give that a shot. And so we sold some winter CSA shares. And we did have an advantage here. We have a big greenhouse that was on the property when we bought it, a 6,000 square foot greenhouse. So that was a big addition. Although at that point we were still doing a lot of renovations and trying to get that into a condition to really grow a lot of food. It had been used primarily to grow seedlings and plants before that. And so we moved a lot of soil in to create raised beds and to grow vegetables in that greenhouse. So that was kind of our beginning. We grew fairly steadily there for a while. I think 3 years, we kind of just increased a little bit each time. So we went from that ½ acre to maybe 3/4, and then we went to about an acre or a little more than an acre the next year. And then in 2010, we were offered the opportunity to use land next door to us. this adjacent landowner, had 10 acres he was not using. And he said, hey, you want to farm this? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. We've done so well with 1.5 acres. Let's grow 7 acres of vegetables. And of course, that was a disaster on many levels, but primarily because we didn't have enough labor to do weed control. We didn't have enough water to keep everything irrigated. And we really didn't have enough of a budget to get fertility out on all that. So we were essentially trying to grow vegetables without enough water, without enough fertility, without enough labor. And so I've said these words, let's get the brush hog out and see if there's any carrots under those weeds. And that is a great way to grow weeds, not a great way to grow carrots. So in 2012, we shrank. At the same time, and I haven't really referenced this, but we were doing pastured poultry alongside our vegetables. In a typical year, we would do about 1,000 meat birds and had several hundred laying hens. And then we also did turkeys, sometimes as many as 200. I think we tried to do 400 turkeys one year. I don't think we ever succeeded quite that number. And then we had some hogs as well. And we're doing a little bit of farrow to finish pork and then selling a lot of piglets as well. So all these things, all these pieces of the puzzle were kind of coming together. But in 2010, it really reached a head in terms of just not having enough time. And so in 2010, we said, well, we're going to give up the animals because I was clearly wired up, more inclined toward vegetables and plants than I was toward animals. And mostly that's a matter of my time frame and things, my commitments I want to make. I really like having free weekends. I like having the ability to go and do things and take a day away from the farm. And with animals, that was very, very difficult. With vegetables, that was much more practical. So in 2011, we cut the animals out, but we're still doing that 7 acres of vegetables. And it helped. Our lives got a little bit less chaotic, but we still had way too much on the ground, trying to tend way too much out in the field. And so that year, it was a pretty dry year in the summertime. And so in 2011, I had a really kind of a moment of truth where I realized this is not working. If we're going to continue, we're going to have to shrink this farm drastically, and we're going to have to figure out a way to do more with less in terms of labor and expenses and things like that. So 2011 was that sort of epiphany year. 2012 turned out to be the biggest drought year that anybody had seen in the Ozarks for probably 70 years, certainly since the 50s. And so we had a good bit of rain in the spring, but then on May 1st, the water spigot turned off. It stopped raining, and it didn't rain again until the 1st of September. So long, hot, dry summer. We were already hitting temperatures in the 90s in the beginning of May. And that year we had retracted to our own property, so we weren't using anybody's borrowed property at that point. And we had about 2 acres of vegetables growing. And that 2 acres actually produced more income, gross and net, than we had on the 7 acres the year before. And additionally, we had a much better quality of life. We had a better daily cycle. I mean, we were actually making headway each day instead of finding ourselves at the end of each day going, oh my goodness, we've got more to do than we started with. It was actually starting to make sense. So that's what brought us to the point where we said, well, 2 acres is about right for us. And so we've held that line pretty closely for the last 13 years. We're basically a 2 to 2.5 acres of vegetable and cut flower production. And so we've grown internally. So our income has expanded considerably within that same footprint. We've gotten better at using our ground. We've gotten better at taking care of the soil. We've gotten better at irrigation, crop protection, and then making sure we, as they say, harvest what we plant. That's kind of the criteria for success anymore for us is, are we harvesting what we plant? Once we put the effort into prepping a bed and getting it into the ground, let's make sure that it's tended and cared for in a way that it's going to come out with a productive harvest. So that's kind of been a guiding principle. We've added some other profit centers over the years, some agritourism. We've gone to more farmers markets and less farmers markets over the year. We do a big CSA nowadays. And so we can dig into all those enterprises as we talk about those specifically. But the farm is big, it's diverse. I mean, it's big from my perspective in terms of how many people I manage. For example, I just did taxes for 2023. And so in 2023, we had 25 employees who generated tax documents. Okay, so some of those people were people who were here every day, all day long. Most of them were people who were part-time, came and went, on a maybe a weekly basis, but a wide range of workers as well. We've had people who've been with us for, my farm manager, Kimby, has now been with me for, I think, close to 12 years. And then we've got people who, you know, call me on a weekly basis, hey, I'd love to come and volunteer and learn something. And oftentimes those people, if that works out over time, they may develop into an hourly or even a salaried worker and really take a place in the farm crew. So a big crew, relatively small plot of land. We've got 25 acres total, and on that we grow about 2.5 to 3 acres of vegetables and cut flowers. But we also have a lot of covered space. So we have, I think, about 30,000 square feet of covered space nowadays. So that's about a quarter to even a third of our total production space is under cover. And that really helps us control some of the challenges the climate throws at us, helps us be more predictable and reliable producers. So it helps in our marketing as well. So then we know when we tell somebody we'll grow tomatoes for you, that we really have a very good chance of being able to do that, both based on the covered space and also on our experience. So that's kind of an overview of the history of the farm. And now we'll dig into individual enterprises. Let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite enterprises on the farm, which is the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Program. The CSA was how we got started, that and Farmers Market. And essentially, it is a group of members who say up front, we want to be part of this farm this year. They pay us to be members of the farm, and then they get a box of produce each week during the growing season. Now, over the years, it's shifted. Initially, we sold, I think, just one size of box, and we had about 25 members. And so, you know, whatever was in that box, that was what you got. And so my family always says, I'm a big family, we say, we get what you get, you don't throw a fit. Unfortunately, that's not really how consumers work. They get what they get, but they might throw a fit. And so over the years, we worked toward moving our CSA from sort of a traditional one-size-fits-all box into a lot of different ways of meeting the consumer needs. And so, for example, we added sizes almost right away. We said, well, it makes sense to me that a family, a single person is not going to eat the same amount of produce as a family of 4 or 5. So we made different size boxes. And then some people would say, well, you know, I really, even this small box is too much produce for me. I really want to be part of the CSA, but how could I? So then we went to every other week boxes for some folks, and that worked out pretty easily, pretty simply for us. We would just put kind of an A group and a B group, and we would try and keep those groups balanced. And at this point, we were still mostly managing this through just a spreadsheet and handwork. And then not too far into our CSA program, a program called Small Farm Central came along. It was Simon at Small Farm Central was one of the first software developers to look at what we were doing and say, wow, these guys' lives could be made much better by a fairly simple piece of software. And so Simon Huntley built that out, and we were taken from the word go, because that was definitely not a strength of ours, managing all that stuff at the desk. So his software managed payments, managed membership sign-ups, and then managed when people should get boxes. So you could have an every other week share, you could have, you know, an array of sizes, and all that could be spit out on a pick list or a box list, and then we would know what to pick. And then he started experimenting with customization. And of course, this was the gold standard for all CSAs, was how do we make sure that the CSA member who loves beets gets their beets every week, but also the CSA member who really never wants to see beets in their share never gets those beets. Because beets, onions, there's arugula, there's a whole bunch of vegetables that are fairly polarizing. People have strong feelings about them one way or the other. And so we had done lots of customer surveys by then and realized there was no crop mix that would make everybody happy. If we did enough beets, some people just were going to hate those beets. And if we didn't have them, a lot of people were going to miss them, and so on. So customization was a big deal. So Simon came up with a program called Harvey, and it's basically an algorithm. And we've been using it now for years. I don't think there's any going back. It makes our customers so much more satisfied, and it really fits their needs very well. And specifically what that means is that on a Thursday afternoon, Kimby and I walk the fields, my farm manager Kimby and I walk the fields. We look at what's available. How many vegetables how many heads of lettuce can we harvest? How many pounds of tomatoes do we think we'll have? And then we look through our cooler, how many hundreds of pounds of potatoes are still in here, how many hundreds of pounds of carrots, and so on. We collect all that into what we call a harvest list, and we put that into Harvey, and then we generate shares. And all that means is we push a button, but the algorithm does the work. And it goes through and it sorts what we've got available into the box sizes and values that we've sold to allow people, and it uses, in the sorting, it uses their preferences. They've gone in advance and rated, kohlrabi from 1 to 5, either love it or hate it. I always put this in my box or never put this in my box, or something neutral. And so Harvey, the algorithm, Harvey goes through and takes our harvest list and sorts it out into those people's individual boxes based on their preferences. So right out of the gate, they've got a modified box that's modified in such a manner that it should be favorable for them, right? And that's wonderful. Then part 2 of that is they get that email on Friday. They have Saturday and Sunday to modify their box further. So if they want to go in and let's say, oh, we love kohlrabi, but this week we really are trying to make a big batch of salsa, and so we'd love to have a bunch of onions, garlic, and peppers, tomatoes, then they can swap their kohlrabi for other vegetables, or vice versa. If they see something they like, they can swap, and if they see something that they like it, but they don't want to swap, they just want to buy it, they also have the capacity to do that, so they can add things to their share. So, of course, all this comes at a cost, and with Harvey, it's around 7%. So that's a steep price to pay, but at the same time, it mostly ended our discontent with the CSA. There were always a few folks who would